Why'd you move that?
Because it sticks right behind my head and it makes me look like I've got a huge puff of hair. And I was kind of sad that your shirt doesn't show up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, they get the idea. Hey guys, it's Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time around, we started the War Games. What was going on there?
Well, this is, so far, fingers crossed, one of the best serials that we've seen with Patrick Troughton. They land in what appears to be World War I, but something seems to be wrong. People can't remember things beyond just a few hours or a couple of days. And then they discover that somebody's got some kind of television-like device, and they wait a minute, this thing wasn't invented for another 20 years at least. And then they cross over into a mist and see some Roman soldiers charging at them. Anyway, they find out that they're apparently in some kind of controlled environment where some entity, who we have met, but we don't know who they are yet, although we assume they are the Time Lords.
Yeah.
They are gathering warriors from different time periods in Earth history. To what purpose we haven't quite seen yet.
Yeah. There's some sort of training going on, and we saw two of the generals in the facility, and they're just going over like, oh, what if I do this and this and this, and just sort of playing a game. So yeah, we're not entirely sure what's going on. At the end, the Doctor and Zoe did infiltrate there and started to learn some stuff about like the processing machine, but the Doctor was recognized by the leader there. So, I have to sneeze, but it's not happening. So it's just annoying instead.
I hate that.
Yeah. So that was basically that.
And then the Doctor was supposed to be executed. Remember? And then something happened, though, and he was able to escape. And Jamie, being a Highlander, they thought he was supposed to be with a Highland regiment in World War I. So I can't remember if they got back together right at the end of episode 4.
Well, they were together for a little bit, but then they got separated again.
Okay.
Because the Doctor and Zoe got into the TARDIS-like apparatus and went off, and I don't know where that... Jamie, that's probably what happened there. So, my brain is not turned on yet, apparently. Well, I think I was also trying to think of Jamie and Lady Jennifer, so my mind just sort of melted at too many names. So, Jamie is with Lady Jennifer still. I think they were captured by the Confederacy. So
that's right, yeah. The Confederate soldiers.
Yeah. There's also a bit of a resistance going on with some of them that can't be processed or mind controlled.
Yeah.
So
managed to break free of whoever's controlling them.
Yeah.
But again, just well written, well acted, well directed. Our only minor quibble was some of the accents were kind of atrocious, but
some of them, yeah. Now the German accents and the guys that were actually speaking German, they sounded really good. But then you get the Southerners, and you get a bit of a repeat of Clancy, but they're barely in there, so it's just sort of a little thing.
And I'm sure our fans over in the United Kingdom often feel just as bad when American actors try British accents.
Yeah.
Because yes, I've seen some American actors who try British accents, and they're just horrendous.
Yeah. Well, and it's a difference of, like, when we hear like someone like Clancy, and that's just horrible. But then, we're sort of spoiled, and I get that, that was in the 60s when no one cared. This was, I'm thinking of examples now, like Christian Bale, as in, like, most roles he does.
That's what I was thinking. Christian Bale's accent was phenomenal.
Yeah, or Hugh Jackman, and that's Australian to American, too. But still, just, like, some of those accents, like, that's really, really good. And then we get something like Clancy, and it's just that... The worst part probably is with Clancy is that most British people seem to enjoy that. It's like, yeah, that's probably fine if you're across the pond and you don't have to hear something like that all the time.
Yeah.
But over here, you hear it in some form or another.
And we're perhaps even more attuned to that because there are a lot of people in Oklahoma whose accents are that heavy.
Yeah.
You know, I've told that story for years. I was down in southeastern Oklahoma. They were the university down there was producing a play that I had written, and I was talking to one of the benefactors, one of the donors who had put up the money to put my play on and to bring me down there to watch it. And I told you the story. When I kind of surreptitiously got around to asking how his family had money, this is exactly what he said to me, and I've used this in my class to talk about Oklahoma accents before. The man said, "Oh, well, my daddy was into all business." And I'm sure, you know, my jaw dropped a couple of inches, and I was trying to think, what the heck did that guy just say? My daddy was into all business. And slowly but surely, he was saying, my father was in the oil business. Now, I knew business. That's all over Oklahoma and all over the South. But to pronounce O-I-L as all, like A-L-L or A-W-L, that took like 5 seconds to all business. So
Yeah.
it's frightening how bad accents can be.
Yeah. And I'm sure, because I mean, there's 8 million accents within the United Kingdom anyway, so they probably understand some of that too. I remember, do you remember the Box Trolls movie?
Vaguely, yeah.
I remember the villain in that. It sounded like he was constantly gargling marshmallows. Because when he would need to say something like a white hat, I swear he always said it as a white hat.
White hat?
And yeah, but that, if it was just like 10 octaves deeper, and it's just like, and I think that was before we were watching movies with subtitles, so I was like, I think he said a white hat. I'm not sure. So
You need to watch My Fair Lady. I realize it's a musical, but it's about Professor Henry Higgins, who is a lecturer on accents and linguistics. And he takes a girl who's got a really heavy Cockney accent, Eliza Doolittle, and he basically says to her, in 6 months, I can pass you off, literally as a member of the royalty. And so the play, and then later the musical, the play is Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw, but the musical is basically where he has to make her unlearn the Cockney accent and ultimately learn how to speak proper English. And of course, the famous phrase, of course, is he tries to get her to say, the rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain, which in her accent comes out, the rain in Spain stays mainly in the plain.
yeah.
And it's painful to your ear. There's even a line in one of the songs where the Scotch and the Irish leave you close to tears. There even are places where English completely disappears. In America, they haven't spoken it for years. So.
Yeah. And I guess that's also the other thing with Clancy, is that we didn't have subs for those episodes because they were recons. So we really had to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, you know, you get something in another episode, or like in some of the shows I'm watching, like there's a character on Life on Mars or a character in Prison Break, and it's like they have, you know, wild, crazy accents, but I can read it and I know what they said. So even just a standard accent, a standard British accent, it's good to have subtitles on.
And I will say, one of my favorite things that we've done in, almost 2 years, or is it 3 years now that we've been doing this, was watching Christopher Eccleston. You know, I love that Northern English, and I realize he's someone pointed out he's not from Liverpool, he's from Manchester.
Something like that.
But again, being brought up in the ages that I was, 12, 13, 14 years old when Doctor Who first came on, living in England. It's also when John, Paul, George, and Ringo made it big. And I just love that Liverpool accent. It's just so much fun. And I've never got a chance to do that on stage, and I hope someday I'll have the chance to be able to do something from up north.
Yeah, so...
Anyway.
That was a tangent. I'm seeing on the recording we're at 10 minutes already, so...
Sorry about that.
Let's go ahead and jump into the war games. Here we go. Battle of the Ages right here.
It looks like Frenchmen and Englishmen and Southerners and Union troops.
Nah.
For once we actually can see it. We'll have to see it in recons. Hello, chaps. What's all this then? If he had just held that in front of him.
Oh, it's a visor. That makes it look less stupid.
I was born in
the 21st century.
Strange they never give her a specific year.
I'm going to show you some photographs.
I was gonna say it looks like a giant, like, picture looker.
Yeah. This...
Anyone known to you?
What's that called? Something?
Particularly.
You're one of... No, please! No! Get him off! No! Come on! Get him! Put him on there! In the machine, quick!
Ooh. Ooh. I hope that just deprocesses him.
With his own petard. Come along then, Clever.
You're just gonna leave him there? Might fry his brain.
Better leave him on simmer.
You expect me to believe all this?
1914-18 war. Yes, it's all recorded here.
Viewmaster. That's what that little thing was.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if we could organize...
It's interesting he doesn't call it World War I, but I guess that's a spoiler to Carstairs.
Your green box machine.
Just what we need.
Oh, it's green?
This emergency call.
When I came to your people, I was promised efficiency and cooperation. Without the knowledge I have, this complete venture would be impossible.
So he came to them. So now I'm wondering, which one of them is the Time Lord?
Guard him. If he gives you any trouble, shoot him.
Knock him out.
You two, you're coming with me. Come on, move!
And what's with your stupid hats?
Now, those are, again, I think one of them's French Foreign Legion. The British guy seems to be from the Boer Wars in South Africa. Couldn't tell where the other one was.
The girl said they have the secret of space-time travel.
That's impossible.
Okay, so they're not the Time Lords.
The truth machine.
But the Warchief, he's the only one who understands space-time travel.
And he's a Time Lord. Gotcha.
His people.
Maybe the reason there's a chief and a warlord is because he's specifically not one of them.
If I can get inside, I'm sure I can control it.
Like you control the TARDIS?
No.
Signal.
That's a really good point. Maybe these machines don't have the TARDIS's temper.
Oh no, they killed Jamie.
Oh no! Well, there's got to be a way to come back from it now. All right, and that is part 5.
Well, we've straightened out a few of the threads.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, this the Warchief definitely feels like a prototype master. So, and not even just from his design. He looks like the master.
Yeah.
But just from the fact that he's on his own, he's a traitor to his own people, and he's come here and he's manipulating whoever these other people are. Yeah. Maybe they're just like humans or something, just really advanced humans. Which, that could explain why these are all Earth wars, specifically. So, yeah, I'm not sure. It's also interesting, they just never give a specific year for Zoe, for what year she's from. Like, it's always just the 21st century. Which then brings up, like, 1,000 other questions, because we've had other stories in the 21st century.
Yeah.
So, but...
Nice effect on the weapons and on the screen.
Well,
She said he had a space-time travel machine.
Yes, I know, but...
Have we taken humans from later than the Earth year 1917?
Of course not. Greater technological knowledge would be dangerous.
Yet this man who tricked you had sufficient technological knowledge to understand the mental processing machinery.
greater knowledge. There were a couple more wars that weren't more advanced.
His people have the secret of time travel.
Are you suggesting he's bringing in his own people? The Time Lord.
Oh, there it is! Finally!
Because he wanted power.
He said it!
I think you'll find that piece goes in there.
Ah, thank you.
Shoot him. Shoot him now.
Knock him out. Why is he less tied than the last time we saw him?
But if you question my loyalty, tell the warlord.
Be absolutely sure of your suspicions. Because if you accuse me without positive proof, I shall crush you.
It'd be funny if the warlord was just him with different glasses.
What happened?
Ooh! Good shot!
Doctor, get out of here!
Not in the army. The resistance, I mean.
You're in the British Army, Private Moore. The year is 1871. You're in the British Army. And I'm your commanding officer.
71.
Now untie me.
Trying to remember what war that would have been.
They are in here. Trapped. Right in.
Sir, they're not trapped.
That should stop them.
Now that's a 60s force field.
Oh, 239 more. Private Moore.
Shoot him!
Wonder if 1871 was the Boer Wars. I thought it was later than that.
Oh, good job. It's like Pirates of the Caribbean.
Why can't a door just open in and out?
Got away.
I don't
One
know.
of them you have.
Good job. Whatever they did.
Oh, gas fill valves.
Oh, and they've got masks.
Don't worry. Nothing can happen to us in here. We're seeing things. Walls. Look! And the ceiling too! Oh no! Oh, where did they go?
Oh, that's a good effect there.
You must surrender, Doctor, or you will all be crushed to death. You have 30 seconds to decide. 30 seconds!
Righty. Well, we finally got the name drop that we've waited 6 seasons for. The name drop of the Time Lords.
Yes.
Which at this point, I mean, I feel like people would start to figure out that the Doctor is also a Time Lord, specifically. So, I'm very curious about this Warlord, since he seems to be almost of a higher power, but I'm wondering if they're going to, like, pull something where the Warlord is also a Time Lord, just secretly. They just don't think he is. So, I don't know.
Well, as we said last time, though, if we didn't know better, I would assume that they were setting up Carstairs and Lady Jennifer for being the new companions.
Right.
Because all the stuff that they've been doing.
Yeah, they have been... Yeah, because normally, like, when we get something... We get people that are somewhat helpful, and then they die, or they just sort of leave, or whatever. But this time, no, they are sticking around for a good portion of this, so... So yeah, if we didn't know this was the end and we were doing a full reset, then I would probably suspect. The only thing I can think is if somehow we get like a different incarnation, but it's the same actor in the next season, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I could easily see like if they show up at Unit or something and then they're just sort of there. So I don't know.
And again, I wish my knowledge of British military history was better, because between the Napoleonic Wars, which ended in 1815, and World War I, which was 1914, there's almost 100 years there. The only other massive engagement that the British made, I think, was in Crimea, but I can't tell if these soldiers from 1871 were the Crimean War or the Boer War. So one is in the Black Sea area there in southern Russia, the other's in South Africa. So it's one of the two, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Correct me in the comments.
Now, it's also interesting they said that the Doctor preset the machine to go back to 1917, But that seems to still be the barn from the Civil War that it went back to. So, unless I'm wrong and unless the Confederacy stumbled upon the barn in 1917, but I'm also just generally curious about, like, so these guys, they must be humans, then, if they're just humans that are being used by the Time Lords and the Warchief. But they stopped at 1917 because they didn't want to, get advanced technology that they're not ready for. But if they have this kind of processing and deprocessing technology anyway, would they not be from somewhere further than 1917?
Yeah, that's kind of troubling because although television was actually invented in the early 20th century, it didn't become fully available until about 1939. I think it was at the World's Fair that they showed off the first operating model, but it was only after World War II, 1945 to 1950, where we began to see regularly scheduled broadcasts of television. But they certainly had telephone and radio and telegraph. Somebody mentioned telephone earlier to one of the British guys, I thought.
Yeah.
Because the American Civil War wouldn't have known what the telephone was. That wasn't until, again, 1870s, 1880s. Now the telegraph was used during the American Civil War.
Yeah.
So, all of this, throwing out all these technological terms, we're going, wait a minute, we're not exactly sure where they are.
Yeah. I mean, I guess... So, I mean, obviously, it's like, okay, they stop in 1917. But you could easily go, well, have World War II, obviously.
Yeah.
After World War II, and leading up to 1969, which is when this came out, I guess that's sort of where it's like, okay, well, we got to stop here. We don't know what wars could be coming up in the future and stuff. Like, okay, well, so we'll say that, but does that imply that these guys are from 1969 then? And I guess the whole thing with the machines to process and deprocess people and the Viewmaster and stuff, I suppose that could be technology from the Time Lords instead of technology that these people created.
Yeah. This may, again, knowing me, this may be taking it too far. Between World War II and 1969, the only two major wars that I think the British would have been involved in would have been Korea, which again was not covered on television. It was covered on radio. And of course the Vietnam War, which was the first war that was literally live in your living room every night. It was one of the reasons why people who were civilians turned against the prosecution of the war, because it was so horrific. In World War I don't even think they did that much radio coverage because they had war correspondents, the actual reporters doing that one.
Yeah.
So that may be an effect of 1969 saying, hey, wait a minute, if we get too far in the future, we will be covered by both radio and TV, so let's go back to when very few people would have heard daily reporting on the war. So that we can't have these people understanding, hey, wait a minute, what is this radio thing they're talking about? What is television, etc.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I guess it could be like, because they have specific captives that are playing out these wars, that it could be like, well, what's easier to sell to people? It's like, okay, so 1917, here's some guys in a trench. Maybe they go and talk to their commanding officer, but for the most part, life is that trench, the stretch, and the other trench, and that's it.
Trench warfare. Yeah.
Whereas, if you get further up to Korea and Vietnam, it's like, well, there's such a broader scope of it that it's like, well, these guys might start questioning things more often.
That's true. Yeah.
So it could be something like that. Obviously, yes, we are reading too far into it, but still.
That's our job. It's what we do.
Yeah. We're still trying to figure out these other people. We understand the Time Lords, and it seems like it's just the Warchief that is a Time Lord here. So now we have to figure out, well, who are these other people that, he's working with, basically.
Now, bringing this up, reminding us that we're so far only mostly with the British with a little bit of American Civil War. Remember, we saw Romans earlier. And the Romans were pretty technologically advanced, other than mass communication. I've always told my world history students the reason why the Roman Empire didn't last any longer than it did: no form of mass communication, no form of rapid transportation. But of the, 7 or 8 time zones that they're supposed to be from, we've only seen 3 of them. You know,
Yeah.
where else? You know, I'd like to see what's happening in some of these other places. Now,
Yeah.
Supposedly the British Empire from 1871, that's definitely a fourth version. But again, they're not a huge part of the plot, and the Romans have completely disappeared since the end of episode 1 and beginning of episode 2.
Yeah, we've sort of switched gears into focusing more on the people in charge and the Time Lords. So it is one of those things, like, they set up, like, you know, a bunch of different times, and they're just sort of backing off on it a little bit, which is not bad, because what they're giving us with, you know, the security chief and the war chief and the warlord and everything, that's all very interesting. But you're right, there was like a promise of like 10 different periods in history all at the same time.
Now, what would be really cool is if I'm assuming there's going to be some kind of gigantic battle finale.
It sounds like that.
But to have, you know, World War I and the 1870s, whether it's Crimean or Boer War, American Civil War, go back to the Napoleonic Wars, you know, go back to the Middle Ages, Knights in Armor, you know, Battle of Jerusalem or something like that, the Crusades. Then go back even further to, you know, the Roman Empire, and then perhaps to the Greeks at Salamis and Thermopylae and places like that. So even the Egyptians, you know, that would be cool to see all 8 or 9 different groups in there whacking away at these guards.
Yeah, that would be interesting. It almost feels like the climax of Endgame, where just all the different, you know, Marvel superheroes and everything are coming through the portals. Like, if you just see like 1,000, which, I mean, they don't have the budget for this, but 1,000 different, you know, soldiers and everything going against the Time Lords.
It's also kind of like, strangely enough, Ready Player One that we watched just recently.
Yeah,
where you've got 1,000 different anime characters and game characters.
Just 1,000 gamers going against a dude in a suit. So.
Or would you sooner they were crushed to death? Oh, I think that's a perfectly horrid idea. Stop him!
Just take all the magnets and run.
Take the pieces off the boards. Knock over the chess set when you're losing.
I can't believe that worked.
Dark helmet.
Nah.
It's impossible to pick them up while the side rat is still moving. I'll pinpoint their position the
side
moment
rat?
it lands.
Is that just TARDIS backwards?
Yeah.
Okay, then.
I remember that was on the license plate on the Bentley in Good Omens.
Yeah.
Alert the Roman zone commanders in sector
Ah,
9.
there they are.
Transmit. There have been temporary difficulties.
But they've been overcome.
This guy's the warlord?
I guess.
It is only a matter of time before they are recaptured.
And I hope that time is on your side.
He looks like Steve Jobs.
This is where we were attacked by the Romans.
They're still there.
Reuse the same shots.
They're still angry.
That's enough from both of you. Now, I am tired of this eternal bickering. Your inability to work together is endangering our whole plan. You have a choice. Cooperate, or be replaced.
You tell it to Congress.
You caused me a great deal of trouble.
Good. I'm very glad to hear it.
I
suppose
Use the conventional forces. Could be quite amusing.
You think his neck hair gets itchy with that turtleneck?
With our little band of heroes.
I don't know. I've never worn a turtleneck.
No.
Stop! Take him! Don't shoot, you might hit the doctor!
Well, that didn't work. Alright. And that is part 7. So, they're not humans, but they're not Time Lords either.
That's the people who are conducting the experiment.
Yes.
But it seems like the war lord and the war chief are Time Lords. Is that correct?
Well, at the very least,
the Warchief is.
Yeah, I don't think the Warlord might just be whatever the other species is. So, just for some reason, he's in charge, basically. It could also... That also stands up to his design, because he just looks like a dude. Whereas, if you're going to be a Time Lord, you gotta look like the Warchief. You gotta have the strange Hunger Games style facial hair.
And the slick back hair.
Yeah, so...
And I noticed that the War Lord also had the little round glasses like all the other people seem to have.
Yeah.
So maybe he isn't a Time Lord.
Yeah.
But I have to say, we're now, 7 episodes into the 10-episode arc here, and this is holding up. This is not like that serial whose name shall not be spoken.
Yeah, right.
We don't want to get into that again.
Yeah, this is definitely probably one of the best ones we've had in all 6 seasons.
Yeah.
So,
and again, just because it's a historical, one of my favorites was right at the very beginning. The whole Marco Polo epic was very good. Although it was a little padded. Could have done, what was it? How many episodes was it? 7?
It was either 7 or 8.
Yeah, it could have been cut down by 1 episode. But again, doesn't seem to be any major padding here. They're taking their time to tell a very complicated story. Yeah. And I appreciate that.
And it's nice because it's a sci-fi story that's centered around historical stuff. And yes, we're not actually in 1917. We're in the 1917 zone. But most of the humans there are from those actual eras, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I was talking with people on Twitter because it's just been announced that Jodie Whittaker is going to be leaving Doctor Who soon. And she only has a limited number of episodes left. And one thing about her era that I find interesting is her historical episodes are some of the best in all of Doctor Who. Like, they are really, really great. So I was kind of joking on Twitter. It's like, oh, if all of her remaining episodes are just historicals, then I'd say that this era was a success. But I was actually thinking, like, obviously they'll do some sort of sci-fi thing. I think they said that the next season is going to be like 1 plot over 6 episodes. So I was thinking, like, well, if they did it like it's sci-fi plus historical, then that could work, Yeah. Because they also do that in Modern Who. There's no pure historicals in Doctor Who anymore. But for the most part, the historicals they do, it's more on historicals, and there's some sort of sci-fi thing in the background, especially with her episodes. So, honestly, I would just sort of want something like this, basically. Like this, but modern, where we get to see that big Avengers Endgame battle,
Well, also, one of the things that I've always thought would be cool with the new Who is if they did the crossover Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where they went back to the original series to do one of the new Doctors crossing back into an episode of one of the old Doctors and kind of just being around the fringes to help that be resolved.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting. They sort of do that. There's an episode where it's actually Capaldi's last episode where he has an adventure with the first Doctor, basically, like right at the end of the 10th planet. But it's its own thing. It's not replaying like that Deep Space Nine episode. It's not replaying the 10th planet. I feel like... See, the thing with Deep Space Nine is I feel like that was close enough to where you could get away with that filming-wise. Like, but if you try to do, like... That'd be very difficult, I feel like, to try to do with, like, 2021 filming technology to be like, let's try to, go back and Forrest Gump into the 60s. Like, that might be a bit tricky.
But you have to admit, though, that Forrest Gump, and there's a Woody Allen film called Zelig that's very similar. They did that very well. I mean, when they put him into crowd scenes, that is very good. It's only when they, like when he was shaking hands with Lyndon Johnson, you could tell that they had manipulated Johnson's mouth to say something about Forrest Gump's butt when he got shot. But in the scene, for example, when he's standing there on the steps of the University of Alabama and George Wallace is saying, we believe in segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever, and Forrest Gump is literally looking over his shoulder, that worked very well. So just something like that, I thought that would be kind of cool.
Yeah. So maybe they could do something like that. So
all right, let's fingers crossed that part 8 keeps us going.
All right. One more for today.
Good Lord, how much time have we spent already?
It's been an hour and a half already, so... Alrighty.
And of course, we still haven't found out why these aliens are conducting this experiment in the first place.
Yeah.
So, hopefully that will also be resolved in the next 3 episodes.
The closest is that it seems like it's the Warchief's idea to do this, because he came to them.
Lads, now don't fire until the door opens.
I'd open fire.
Get back!
Ooh.
Ooh. Ooh.
You do know him. Of course I do. And only I can deal with him. Release him.
He is my prisoner.
But I am your superior.
Prisoner my, superior your.
Subtitle guy is getting tired.
I wonder how many sets they've constructed for this serial.
You may have changed your appearance, but I know who you are. Oh, do you? Your machine is a TARDIS. You're too familiar with its controls to be a stranger. I had every right to leave.
Lore.
The aliens intend to conquer the entire galaxy. 1,000 inhabited worlds. But why choose the people of the Earth? They are the most suitable recruits for our armies. Man is the most vicious species of all.
Well, that simply isn't true.
Consider their history. For 500,000 years, they have been systematically killing each other.
Have you met the Daleks?
Now we can turn this savagery to some purpose.
Oh,
We
yes, you
can
can't
bring
control
peace
them.
to the galaxy. I'm not the cold-hearted villain you suppose me to be. My motives are purely peace.
Said Thanos.
Meh. He was already asleep.
Oh. Banditos Mexicanos.
Boy, it would really help if they established the TARDIS translation yet.
I thought he was supposed to be on our side.
But he is. Well, I mean, he will be if we can persuade him to join us.
Well, didn't you explain to him?
Yes, I tried, but he wouldn't listen. He's got rather primitive ideas about women knowing their place.
How's he now? Oh, sounds a nice chap.
Jamie, this is no laughing matter. They have a stronghold.
I have heard. It is impossible to get in there.
Well, we have been there. And if we can get a big enough army together, I can take you all there.
All right. I stay for this meeting. And then we see.
Wonder if any of them speak Latin, because Marcus Octavius won't speak any language that they know.
You have given these aliens our science and our knowledge to carry out this disgusting plan. We are going to bring a new order to the galaxy. One united galactic empire. An empire of slaves. I intend to take over as supreme galactic ruler. You can help me to rule. If you will cooperate.
This is turning into Star Wars, actually.
I tell you it's crazy.
Next one's due in the Crimean War Zone. It's due about now.
So, Crimean, not Boer. By the way, if you've never read Charge of the Light Brigade, you really need to. It's just a short poem.
Another communications failure. Crimean War Zone. Send a squad of guards.
Send a guard squad. What's... Thinking the man who put up the closed captions doesn't speak English well.
Nah.
So that's the Roman zone then.
Technician and guard, that's only 2 men.
It's entirely possible that maybe the subs were auto-generated and then they had to fix them. And then they missed a couple spots.
English Civil War. Boer War. Greek Peninsular War.
Jamie, Boer War Zone.
Civil War zone? Yes, fine.
That's the Cavaliers and Roundheads. Peninsular
Right,
War.
well, that seems to be about it.
I can't remember what that one is.
Phase 2.
How do you propose to deal with them, with your guards scattered all over the war zones?
The neutron bomb.
Oh,
Would
jeez.
wipe out. Cast Doctor. Zoe.
Doctor!
Jamie. Are you all right? Yes, everything's under control now. Now listen, everyone.
Where's
just
Lady
follow
Jennifer?
me. We're going to take over the war room. Stand still! Don't move! You are completely surrounded.
Doctor!
Thank you, Doctor. A nice, neat little package for us to dispose of.
All right.
Now, I would have thought that he would have given them some clue. You know,
Yeah.
say something that only they would recognize.
Yeah.
But apparently that's coming later.
Yeah. Now, before we go on, I noticed about 10 minutes ago that my phone is about to die, so I'm going to plug it in before that happens.
Okay.
Right about there. And with a resync, and we're back.
I don't think we've ever had to interrupt before.
I've had that happen when it was occasionally me and I just keep rambling forever, but no, never in one of these videos. So, alrighty, we are back to discuss the war games. So, that's episode 8 down, and there's still 2 more, so. Alrighty. Well, let's see. The first thing that I wrote down was the resistance, the different resistance groups, which is interesting. Which, at least there we get a bit of a good knowledge of how big, the entire war games is, and how they, or how many different wars there are, which is interesting. Yeah. So that was really good. And then bringing in all the colorful characters for all the leaders and stuff is good. I will say, we spent, which is probably, this is why we ran out of batteries. We spent 8 hours talking about accents at the beginning of this video. So and I will say accents are better in this episode than they were like in the Space Pirates. Yeah. Even though some of them, like with Arturo Villar's, he's goofy, he's a bit of a ridiculous accent, but I don't know, it just seems better. So
well, his was very much like what Troughton did with Salamander. It's Spanish accented English.
Yeah.
So you would understand that a person who grew up speaking Spanish and then learned English would be able to speak that way.
Yeah.
Now, again, to us, we are used to hearing actors speak that way, and that's why that doesn't bother us as much as it does somebody who is not an American trying to speak standard American English, I would think.
Yeah. I guess maybe part of it is, like, with, like, Clancy, like, you have the added part of it that he has to bring in not just a Southern accent, but Southernisms and everything, and all shucks and that sort of stuff, and I'm just an old prospector and stuff like that. And whereas this guy, yes, he's going a little over with his accent, but it's not the worst, I guess. And the fact that he's been, he's only introduced in this episode, and he's still sort of a minor character, really. So,
now, the couple of lines that the Russian had, again, sound very much like you would expect an American actor or British actor speaking Russian accented English. Very similar to what we saw in Black Widow,
Yeah, that's true. So,
but I would wonder if a Russian heard him speaking, would they go, "Oh, well, that's not accurate at all"?
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
Let's skip over accents. We'll talk about more of that some other time.
Yeah. So, and don't get us started on word pronunciations. So, let's see. We have the deprocessor, which was interesting, which the Doctor was able to just take, and he can now use it. That was also pretty interesting. They do allude to, deprocessing everyone, and maybe we could do it like dozens at a time, but they never really they didn't really go anywhere with that, because obviously the Doctor is captured again. Yeah. So it'd be interesting if maybe that'll come back. Maybe that's how they do it, or at the very least, if they can do that, then once these aliens and the Time Lords are defeated, then they can deprocess all the humans and send them back where they should be.
Yeah.
So
now it occurred to me they might try one of those things like in the second Superman movie, where he originally goes into the chamber to take away his Kryptonian powers, but then he manages to reverse it so that only people inside the chamber keep their Kryptonian powers, and that's how he deprives Zod and the other two of their powers, because they're outside. So
yeah,
but there's been no indication that he's had any time to do that yet.
Yeah, so let's see. Well, in these episodes, we do get the first reveal of the Time Lords, and that the Warchief is specifically a Time Lord. Now, it's interesting, because I thought that, and obviously we still have 2 episodes left, but I thought that when they introduce the Time Lords, they introduce the larger, the greater Time Lords, whereas this guy seems to be on his own.
Like the Doctor, he's a fugitive.
Yeah, exactly, and very much sort of like the Master too, where he's off on his own and he's trying to get power and conquer and everything. So I would bet you that when they were like, well, what can we do with Time Lords and everything? I bet they thought like, well, what if we did something like the Warchief, and thus they created the Master. Because the Master, again, I think his first appearance is at the beginning of Season 8, so it's not too far off from this. So,
and I love the line, very subtle, where he said, "You may have changed your appearance, but I still recognize you."
Yes, that was good. I feel like, and even though it's just sort of one line, not only does it remind the audience of like, oh yeah, going all the way back, we did used to have someone else, and then the Doctor, changed his face, he rejuvenated, and then that's a good setup too, because he's about to do that again.
Yeah.
So, so that is interesting.
It is interesting though that the Warchief does not say, you regenerated or whatever. He doesn't make a reference to that, but he just says you've changed your appearance.
Yeah, I think. And again, I'm not quite sure how the regeneration goes in the final episode, but it may be something like they still haven't figured out the regenerations yet. It could be that they'll take, during the third Doctor's era, they might, start to flesh that out a bit. It might just be that at this point, maybe the Doctor is sort of unique among the Time Lords because he did change his face. Maybe he's, at this point they were thinking that he's the only one that can do that. Maybe they were also thinking, is it something to do with the TARDIS? They're still trying to figure it out. So, because that is another thing, is that we've only seen that happen once, is between the first and second Doctor, and that was on the TARDIS. So it could be something like in the audience's or the writer's mind, like, well, is it something to do with the TARDIS, or is this something the Time Lords can do? So, but we'll have to go into that more next time when we finish up the War Games. So, let's see. And then we had the Warlord, so the Warlord is the leader among these aliens.
And they never say who they are, where they're from, just the home planet.
Yeah, so I don't know. See, I want to say that maybe they're humans just from the future, but that doesn't work with the 1917 thing.
Yeah. Now, one thing that, I don't want to say it bothered me or troubled me, but when they were talking about the humans are the most vicious species, in nearly other science fiction from this time period, they don't talk about how vicious humans are, but about how unpredictable and how different they are, how they will not bend their knee. I mean, that was even in the latest Marvel saga, where Loki says, "You've all had too much freedom. You don't know what to do with it, so you will all bow before me." And the one guy says, "I will never bow before you." And that's that's what a lot of people in the 60s and 70s were basically saying is, no, I mean, it is our greatest strength. It's also our greatest weakness. The fact that we are very independent. We will not come together unless we are all threatened. And that's when the world tends to come together like we did in World War I and World War II to fight a common enemy.
Right. And that's the basis for most like disaster movies too, like Independence Day or something. It's like, all the humans, they get together. It's about time the Americans came up with something. That dumb line in that movie, but anyway. But yeah, it's also interesting too because you would think even the most common Doctor Who viewer at this point would be like, oh, they're the most vicious species. Like, really? Like, because we've had plenty of the Daleks and the Cybermen, and we've had, two serials of the Ice Warriors, and then every single one-off villain. And even if you try to... Because you can't even put, some of the crazier stuff that the Doctor does on humans, because it's, established from the beginning he's not human, and only now do you realize he's a Time Lord, like the Warchief. So it's like, so why man specifically? Like, the most he says is like, well, they've been killing each other for 500,000 years, so that's how those are the soldiers that these aliens want. So it's one of those things like, well, I guess, it's one thing to say they're a very vicious species, or they're like very military inclined or conflict inclined or something like that. So it's just sort of interesting to think about.
Well, I will say this, and that, again, this is a theme that runs through science fiction even up till now, is that we do develop more efficient ways of killing each other.
Yeah.
But the people who develop those ways often have it turned against them. So
yeah. So, which I guess this does give us the reason why they've set up the war games, is they're trying to get the best possible human soldiers so that they can use them to conquer the galaxy, which is interesting. Which, again, is strange, especially because, like, oh, well, they're not humans, but they stop at 1917. Even if, okay, they don't want to get into World War II or Korea or Vietnam and stuff like that. Just the idea that it's like, yes, we're going to get some of the greatest soldiers alive, like Joe Bob from the Confederacy and the Romans. Okay, the Romans, not bad, but some of that...
They have a neutron bomb.
All
right, a neutron bomb would essentially wipe out any animal species, but would preserve the environment. It would preserve the cities. It would preserve the plants and everything like that. So it seems like if you've got a neutron bomb, why are you wasting your time with human soldiers?
Yeah, the only thing... You know what this kind of reminds me of? In Star Trek Into Darkness, where... Spoiler alert, and I guess this is technically the big spoiler, but everyone got spoiled on this anyway, that it's Khan. And they say that, well, in this version, Khan is, he's brought back by Admiral Marcus instead of the Enterprise crew, and Marcus uses him to design weapons, and he says, he wanted my savagery, he wanted that sort of, warrior's mentality, despite the fact that he's like, 200-300 years old at that point. Maybe that I could kind of understand, like, okay, you need, like, the best strategist, like, okay, well, if you're going to space, and you're going to conquer aliens, do you want to take a Roman legion? I'm not sure. Maybe if there's a ground assault, maybe, but, like, the closest to the space battles would be World War I, but that's only because they have just invented the airplane. But that's it. Like, there is the slight disconnect unless you're thinking, unless the plan is, and it's entirely possible that this is the plan, that you train the best soldiers in the war games, and then you train them for actual, space warfare, and then they are the best, and you can send them against all sorts of planets. But then it's like what you said with, devise great ways of killing each other, and then it's turned back on them. What stops these Earth soldiers who are way more advanced than you now because you bred them to be so skilled, what stops them from turning back on you?
Yeah.
And you can't beat them because you specifically made them to be better. Which, at that point, yes, these aliens have not thought that through. I'm sure the Warchief is thinking, well, if that ever happens, I leave. You know, he just sort of gets out of there like the Joker or something. Is like, well, I'm just going to abandon you guys. You guys have fun. I'm just going to leave, you know? So, something like that, I guess. Let's see. I did like the moment where they were trying to get away in the TARDIS-like machine, and then the Warchief started bringing in the inner dimension, which was really good. And then, honestly, yes, it was obvious, like, okay, they filmed just sort of a couple panels being brought down on the actors, but it honestly looked pretty convincing.
Yeah.
So,
and inspiration obviously for George Lucas. The crushing scene and the Galactic Empire.
The Galactic Empire and you can join me and we can overrule, we can overturn them. There's a little bit of like some Star Wars undertones. Which, I mean, George Lucas, he always got inspiration from, like Flash Gordon and all that sort of stuff. So it's entirely possible that he may have seen some Doctor Who.
Yeah.
So
I think somebody has said that he was a Doctor Who fan. One of the comments earlier on.
And I guess, when I say the TARDIS-like things, that would be the Sidrat, which is just TARDIS backwards. So you have to think like, they're thinking like, oh, the Sidrat. And when Zoe says TARDIS, time and relative dimension in space, do you think Sidrat is literally just that backwards? So it's space in dimensions, relative, and time. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue quite the same way. And I guess this sort of also maybe brings up a first... Well, probably not the first. There have been a lot of lore contradictions, I'm sure. But, in the first episode, they say that Susan came up with the name TARDIS. And here, the Warchief is like, oh, you have a TARDIS, don't you? So that implies that perhaps she didn't name it, but...
Unless she called it that before they left Gallifrey, which nobody's mentioned yet.
Yeah, which I'm going to doubt they name drop Gallifrey yet. But, and of course, they're Time Lords, there's time travel. Maybe it's a paradox that she called it the TARDIS, but then somehow that name just sort of got swept back in time, so they called it the TARDIS, and it's just a whole sort of loop on the name, which is way overthinking it. It's just...
Now, did the monk ever call his a TARDIS? Or was that who was that at that time?
Vicky
and
Stephen.
I always want to say Peter.
Yeah. I think it might have just been them. I don't know if the monk ever called it a TARDIS specifically, or maybe they did. I don't know. That was a long time ago, because the monk was the top of season 3, I think. Or no, it was the end of season 2, and then he came back in season 3. So it's been quite a while since then. So, goodness, I looked over to see. I was like, oh, since I've got the phone plugged in and it's on fast charging, so it'll be able to keep up. We won't have any power concerns. So I was like, oh, okay, so it'll be enough to talk for just a little bit, or a little bit of decent discussion. I've already looked. We've been talking for 18 minutes already. So
yeah, you can edit these discussions. I know you don't, but you could.
I could try. The problem is we ramble too much that I actually can't. You have to keep the entire rambled run-on sentence for it to make any sense.
Yeah. And if you guys have ever turned on the closed captions on our rambling, oh Lord.
Yeah, the auto-generated captions. I've messed with captions for a little bit to make them look better on some videos, but they are such a pain. And then I've tried it on like a 1-minute video. Doing it on something as long as this, and I feel like this is going to be one of our longer episodes. I can't imagine trying to do that. So like, I would have to hire an entire person just, like, solely 24/7. They would have to be going through making the subtitles work properly.
And let's hope this discussion doesn't run for 24 hours.
Yeah. So.
Right, moving on.
Let's see. Well, they set up the base at the chateau, which was good, and using the time-space barrier around the chateau was very, very clever, so no one could get in. And then, so we had not only the death of Smythe, but also the German guy. I don't remember what his name was.
No. Yeah. Who pretended he was a Confederate and then got shot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you would also wonder, like, there was that one, was it Moore, that, you know, he gave him the monocle. You think everyone would be up to speed, like, no, don't give them their glasses. That is the specific way that they hypnotize people. Yeah. So, and I can only guess that maybe that's also Time Lord technology, because, well, and I guess at this point the only thing we've seen is the Doctor doing hypnosis, but we know later that, like, the Master does that a lot too. So, I'm curious how much technology the Warchief has given them, you know? And it's also just interesting, too, to have him go to these aliens and give them the ability to conquer the galaxy, but he's only going to use them so that he can then overturn them and rule the galaxy.
Sounds like Mavic Chen.
It kind of does a bit, except instead of Daleks, it's these random aliens. Which, to the Warchief's credit, they're a bit more manipulatable. Is that a word?
It is now.
All right, then. We'll see if that captures in the auto-generated subtitles. So, let's see. We did have the meeting between all the Resistance leaders, which honestly does... I guess more on the Star Wars side, that's like all the Rebel cells, you know, coming together and forming into the Rebel Alliance. So, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna bet you some of this specific serial inspired George Lucas. Because I mean, like, with other stuff, like, yeah, you've got, like, in Flash Gordon, you've got the evil, you know, leader who could inspire, like, the Emperor or Darth Vader or something, or, you know, other sorts of stuff, like, you know, samurai movies or westerns and stuff. But the specific Empire and the Resistance and, you know, the special people that are bringing them all together and going and stopping the evil Empire and the people that want to take over and stuff, that is very much this specific episode.
But remember, in the Flash Gordon movie, which of course also came out after this, though, you had the people from the Tree Planets, and then you had the Hawkmen, and you had 2 or 3 other groups that were joining the Resistance there. But again, that movie came out after this, but I don't know if in the original Flash Gordon comic serial that there was anything like that.
Yeah, so let's see. And then I did write down the lore drop that we got. So finally confirming that the Doctor is a Time Lord. After 6 years, they finally were like, let's figure out where this guy came from. And, you know, it does sort of make me wonder, like, I guess honestly this isn't, like, too big of a change to the Doctor's character, and obviously we knew from the beginning, but the whole thing, because I'm thinking about this in terms of the response to the Timeless Children, which you don't know anything about, but I remember when that came out and there was the whole, you know, big brouhaha. People like it, people hate it. Some people say it ruins 60 years of Doctor Who. I finally watched the episode and I'm just sort of indifferent to it. It's like, oh, this gives the Doctor's origins. Except it does and it doesn't, and it doesn't really add anything, but it doesn't really take away anything. And it kind of feels like this too, where it's like, now granted, this is a big reveal that he is a Time Lord. We've met another time, although we've already met the monk too, but we've met another Time Lord. We know that they are both sort of fugitives from their home planet, but honestly, I guess this doesn't really change the Doctor too much. We already kind of knew, at least already knew he wasn't human, he was from another world, and we've had times before, like, I remember at the end of the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, when Stephen goes off and the Doctor is just left alone on the TARDIS, and he's thinking about all his companions, and he thinks, perhaps maybe it's time for me to go home. And he thinks, no, but I can't go back. And so that's a little like, oh, okay, I wonder what the situation is there.
Yeah.
So finally, that is sort of revealed here that they specifically say he stole a TARDIS and ran away. So it's not quite the same, like, big thing as the Timeless Child thing. But at the same time, I wonder if there were people that maybe didn't like this. But I guess I don't really see that happening, because this is just explaining stuff that we could already sort of speculate on, I guess.
Yeah, I doubt that the Doctor Who fan base was as rabid in 1969 as it is now.
And you could say that about pretty much every...
in a good way.
But you could say that about every fan base. I mean, it's... When you think about, like, when... Going back to Star Wars again, but when Star Wars first came out, and everyone, everyone was fans, and then eventually when toys finally started being produced and everyone got toys and they were excited for the next one and stuff, now you come to today and everything is so different. And like I've noticed on Twitter that you could almost like time a watch to this. You can time when The Last Jedi will start trending on Twitter, and you get people that love it and people that hate it. Now, I like the movie just fine. I thought it was pretty good. It didn't ruin Star Wars or anything. But just every so often, The Last Jedi will be trending on Twitter, and there will just be, and obviously it's Twitter, so Twitter sucks anyway, but there will just be such animosity, even from people that like it. And it's just insane. So you're right, probably back then, the Doctor Who fan base, of which it was probably children, maybe teenagers at that point who had grown up with it, they were probably a lot more chill back then.
Yeah.
So
now, one other thing is you and I, again, looking back 60 years on, we have to understand that they're already planning Troughton's exit and what's going to happen with the next season.
Yeah.
So when they say, all right, Pat's leaving and we're going to bring, and they probably already announced John Pertwee is taking over.
Probably.
But they've also found out that they're not going to be able to do a lot of time travel and he's going to be stuck on Earth. Now, given those parameters, they go to Terrence Dicks and who is it?
Malcolm Hulk. Yeah.
And say to them, here's what you here's the end point you have to get to. Now you've got to write this to get us to that point. And so they very carefully construct this idea. Well, here's what we already know about the Doctor. So in order to get him to be stuck on Earth, we have to figure out some way of somebody doing that to him. We've already had the monk. We now have this new guy who says okay. So then they begin to say, we already know where the end point is. We now have to construct everything around that, and that's when they say, hey, wait a minute. We know the Doctor is from another planet. He's from a different race. Why don't we bring in some of these other people who strip him of that power to travel and change him into John Pertwee?
Yeah. Well, and also because you have to think, like, because it has to be someone of significance that can do this to the Doctor, because the Doctor so far pretty much has never lost. He's always been able to outsmart his opponent. So you have to think, like, okay, well, who would be big enough to do that? Yeah. And the two biggest contenders are the Daleks and the Cybermen. But then you think, well, they wouldn't trap him on Earth. They would kill him.
Yeah.
So then it's the only other thing you can do is the Doctor's own species, punishing him or whatever, or just trapping him on Earth, thus creating the Time Lords. So yeah, it had to have been very interesting. Now, with the production of this episode, because this has been a very high quality production they've gotten here, I'm almost wondering if it's sort of like they were like, okay, so you can do all this, but then once you get the next guy, we're limiting you on all this sort of stuff. And they're like, okay, but we're fine until then, right? Yeah, you're good. Cool. And then they just, like, we have to go out with a bang. And they just, like, spent as much money as they could. I think that's, I don't remember what show this was. It was one of Conan O'Brien's show where he was like, well, I guess I'm going to be leaving, so I'm spending millions and millions of dollars on paintings and cars and everything for the show that we're just going to trash right here on set because what are they going to do? They're already firing me. So I would be curious if it's that, because this honestly is probably one of their higher productions that they've done, especially in the Troughton era too. So
are we almost done?
I hope so. It's been about a half hour on this discussion, basically. I mean, that's pretty much the only other stuff I have is, what was it? Arturo VR, obviously
right. Based on what people in the 1960s would know of Pancho Villa, who was not Mexican Revolution so much as he was a bandit who was crossing over into the United States. The United States commissioned John J. Pershing, Blackjack Pershing, to chase him down, and Pershing then, of course, got the assignment to take the American Expeditionary Forces over to Europe to fight in World War I, yada yada yada. So it's obviously based on Pancho Villa, but it's not Pancho Villa.
Yeah, it's also interesting. It's like, okay, so he has the, as Zoe put it, the primitive views on women. It's interesting. I mean, I suppose I shouldn't say I like this, but it's kind of funny that Jamie tries his best, but he does still have sort of those, 1700s views on women too. But he does his best,
but again, in Jamie's instance, he has come to understand the value of the women companions, but he's also very protective of them.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure half of it is just to bug Zoe. Like, he knows specifically. It's like, well, if I say something like this, that'll really get a goat. So, yeah. And I guess that's basically it.
Wow.
This was probably one of the longer videos we've done,
but considering the source, it was pretty good.
And the funny thing is, next time we're only doing 2 episodes, so it'll be one of the shorter episodes. Now, granted, that depends on how long we talk, because not only will we be talking about the last 2 episodes of the War Games, but most likely we'll be going over the Troughton era as a whole and discussing that. So probably next episode will be mostly in the discussion as well, whereas this one is just sort of all over the place. I mean, when I edited the last episode, I was trying, but I left a lot of footage in that video. Plus, we talked for a while. And I imagine that's going to be the same sort of thing here. So, you got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right. I am actually getting slightly, dehydrated with all this talking and stuff. So, we'll wrap it here. So, with all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time for the end of the War Games. See you guys there. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. There's a bunch of links on screen if you want to go click around to any of those. There's 2 different playlists, one for Doctor Who Classic and one for Doctor Who Modern. There's also a subscribe button and a Patreon button on screen, as well as other links in the description if you want to go check out any of those. See you guys later.